Hello and welcome to Making Revenue Tick. I am joined by favourite of the pod, Meredith Chandler. How are you doing, Meredith?
I'm great. So excited to be back here with you, Richard. So thanks for having me.
No, absolute pleasure. We obviously had you on to tell your career story, and we loved the episode so much. I thought we have to do some stuff that's one-to-one, particularly because you've got this not only wonderful career story that we've heard all about, but you've got your own coaching business, which I think will be useful to interlace into this conversation, which means you've got so much access to not only challenges that you face in your career, but other people have faced. And I know the topic that we're going to talk about today is hiring mistakes, of which there are many things that can go wrong in hiring. I've seen most of those things, I would imagine, after my 16 plus year career as a tech sales leader and then more recently as a recruiter. And we had a conversation which sparked this podcast, and maybe we should bring people into that world. So when you told me about this big hiring drive that you were doing, what was that story that you shared with people or shared with me that we can tell people about around the mistakes and challenges that you found?
Yes, hiring is such an interesting topic because I know you know, and your listeners probably know, but a mishire can equate to hundreds of thousands of dollars in lost revenue for a company, right? It's not just putting a person in a seat. It's hundreds of thousands of dollars with their ramp. If they don't ramp, the time that it takes to train them, the time it takes to find them, the time it takes to interview them. If you've got recruiting agencies you need to pay out, it is very expensive. And so you can't afford to get it wrong. And the opening can't be open too long, but you can't just take anybody. And so it's a very fickle topic. So I'm excited to be talking about it with you today, because not only do I help a lot of my consulting clients get this right, but I actually just hired our two founding account executives at P Club, where I'm head of sales. And we went to market for these two founding roles. And I had actually fallen victim to some of these mistakes that we'll be talking about today. So great learnings that I'd like to share and help everyone here avoid, but didn't get the hire the first round. And it was about a month or so of getting somebody to the final stages, extending an offer and having it not work out. So we actually went back to market a second time. And so it took a lot of time, and excited to share those learnings here.
Yeah, amazing. Thank you. It's one of those really interesting things, right? Because a month might not even seem that long. I know for the person that's carrying the number, it always feels long. And a lot of people will be listening to this going, we've maybe got some open seats right now. If you're talking about an account executive, and let's say you've got a $1.2 million quota, and you're looking for 2 reps, that's 200,000 of revenue
per month.
200 grand per month, every single month that you don't have that person in place. So it's incredibly expensive just to have the open seat, let alone the actual cost of everyone's time involved in a recruitment process. Because it's not like you're going, oh, it's been 5 weeks, we've not seen anyone. You're like, we're going through repetitions and failing. You know, it's like having all that stuff in your sales funnel, and then you never get the close one deal, which is just a waste of time, and it's really expensive. So I think this is a really good topic to talk about, particularly because we're talking about go-to-market roles, right? And it's not like we're hiring for doctors or engineers where you're going, right, you have this level of qualification. And so you've already got people that you know can do the job, and therefore it's more about the other stuff, like the expectations, testing the skills, all those sorts of things. You don't have the same kind of qualifications and certifications that someone's going to be good. But it also means that because there isn't the same gates that someone needs to go through in terms of their education and their career to reach a level where they could, let's say, get paid $150,000 base salary, like a doctor that might need to train for 9 years, it means there's a lot more of these people. And so when you go out to market, you attract a lot.
Yeah, you attract all kinds when you go to market. So we'll get into it in just a few minutes. But yeah, you're absolutely right. It's that fine balance of, I need to fill this role now, but I can't just let anybody take this role.
Absolutely right. Absolutely. And there are a load of people who are career interviewers and do a really good job of it. And it's really easy to make a resume look really good, particularly with ChatGPT.
Yeah.
So How do we find the right people? I think it'll be interesting. So what we basically talked about in terms of what this could be in terms of a structure was there's probably a bunch of big hiring mistakes that you've made personally, that I've made, that the people that you've consulted and that I work with have made consistently. So let's try and boil that down maybe into a top 7 mistakes that we've made so that people can avoid them, with the goal of getting hiring right first time. Because it will never be an exact science. It's impossible to get this stuff right 100% of the time. But if we can move that success rate from, let's say, 30% of my hires are successful to 70 plus, then suddenly we're in a position where we can actually build a successful business. Because I think a lot of people who are languishing below the 50% success rate on new hires are in a whole world of pain right now. And there's probably some consistent things that they're doing wrong. Let's start with number 1. So when we talked about these topics, you had the first thing that came to mind. What's number 1 on your list in terms of the hiring mistakes that you made?
Yes, it seems almost too obvious, Richard, but the first and foremost is the biggest mistake I see is hiring managers or orgs not being crystal clear on the job duties and therefore the required skills. So different duties require different skills. Yeah, thank you,
Sure.
Captain Obvious. That's it sounds super simple, but essentially, if you're hiring for a GTM role, you're hiring an AE, and the responsibility is closing new business, you need to dig deeper into that, right? So they're going to need strong pipeline generation skills. Again, if it's new business, you have to think about where the leads coming from. Are we feeding them leads? Are they going to be able to land and expand? Because those are expansion skills, and those are very different from hunting, right? Hunting and farming are completely different.
Sure.
Having a generic job duty such as closing $1 million is not generic, or I'm sorry, it's too generic. It's not specific enough. So you need to figure out, again, if the quota is 1 million, is it okay if a rep comes in and closes $1 million deal? Is that an exemplary rep for you? If so, great. Like, your job is done, but most leaders are going to want to mitigate that risk, because if that $1 million churns, you're screwed. So now you're looking at, instead of closing $1 million in your job description, you want $1 million across 20 logos minimum. So we're getting more specific here. And therefore, from that, we can start to build the skills or think about the skills needed to complete that job duty.
Interesting. Because I see a lot of briefs for jobs, and we've all seen the adverts on LinkedIn. I remember seeing the adverts that you did for LinkedIn and just thinking, this has obviously not been written by a person in HR who has no experience of managing salespeople. This has been written by a hiring manager. It had flair, it had colour, it had excitement as well as clarity. But most job ads and most briefs that I get from a client starts with something like, we're looking for someone with 5+ years experience in selling MarTech into enterprise. And you're going, okay, so your first thing is about experience, about time in seat as like the number 1 value. What's your view on that, time in seat as a major criteria?
It depends, especially when you think about time in seat in certain verticals. I think it's okay if you really are dead set on having that experience within your realm. It's not always necessary. And again, it depends on what you're selling, right? So if you're hiring an SMB rep, you're not going to get 5 years in seat. However, if you're looking for enterprise, you're likely going to want at least 2 to 3 years enterprise experience, because it's not the same as selling SMB. And there are other things you have to take into consideration, right? What can your company afford to pay? And are your pay bands adequate with the corresponding years of experience? Or will you take less experience because you can't pay as much, but in return, you are willing and able to invest in them?
Sure.
So a few different factors.
Interesting. And you're talking about, a lack of clarity around the duties and therefore the required skills. I genuinely believe that most people, when they go to market for a role, and let's say we're doing that through advertising as well as maybe preparing a brief that we're going to send out to our networks and send out to a target list of candidates, is they don't really ever define the outcomes they're looking to achieve. So like you say, they might have a quota number, but there isn't a wider thinking around what's the actual impact we're trying to make in our business here. What would have been true if this person's been in our post for 1 year? What's come true and made that person successful? And therefore, what skills do we need this person to be strong at for those results to come true? That thinking doesn't really exist. What typically happens, in my experience, is a business, let's say you as a hiring manager, and you're working in a larger scale business where you've got a internal recruitment team, HR team, maybe a group of agencies, is you go, I'm looking for this. And then someone's job is to go and produce that JD. And what they'll do is they'll go into their content management system, find an old job template, or worse, go to Google, which I've seen happen many more times than you would ever care to imagine. And they go, right, what are the responsibilities that I should be hiring for here? And it's like you say, prospecting abilities, use skilled in HubSpot, like all these sorts of things, but it's not talking about the outcomes. So when you talk about the specific duties, can you flesh that out for me a little bit? What do you mean by the type of duties that you as a hiring manager realized were the actual things that you needed to be going to market for?
Yes. So for example, going back to hunting versus farming, right? So for this particular example, when we just hired for P Club, it was largely going to be hunting, maybe 70%, 30%. So it's not enough to just say we need closing experience, because somebody who closes inbound leads maybe is a great closer, but if you can't find your own pipeline, you're going to have nothing to close. And so again, in this particular instance, it's not enough to just say, I need closing experience. You need to identify, we need closing experience where at least half of the time you are sourcing your own pipeline. So I think that's a big differentiator. And then also the sales cycles, right? So what were you selling? What was the sales cycle? Again, SMB is drastically different than mid-market and enterprise. And it all comes back to your bandwidth and your ability, willingness to train. If you want to take an SMB rep who you think has a lot of the maybe fundamentals, but not those skills perfected, but you're able to train them, then by all means go ahead. But if you are not a trainer, or if you don't have the bandwidth and you just want someone who's ready, then you need to ask specifically, what was your sales cycle? Who were you selling to?
Sure.
How did you sell, to really figure out what their cycle was previously.
Yeah, interesting. Because what you've described in terms of the problem, the mistake, not defining the duties and therefore the skills tight enough. And we joked about the fact that you'll attract a lot. It's not, these are people, right? So every time that someone applies for a job or registers an interest or flings their resume to you, they think they've got a chance. Obviously, I think some people just hit easy apply because they're like, I need to do 20 today. I'm just going to apply for 20. But if you're not making that clear for people around what the expectations are, then of course they're going to go for it, because they will fill in the ambiguity quite positively in their mind, as opposed to going, oh, I clearly don't have 70% of these things, therefore I won't go for it. So when you didn't define the duties and skills, what were the problems that caused you?
Well, I will say we were pretty clear in the job description, but I have seen this in the past, Richard. So again, when you talk about filling in the gaps, if somebody sees $1 million quota, they might think, oh yeah, my last quota is 1.5. I've got this. They interview you, they reach out, they say, I used to have a $1.5 million quota. And you're thinking, oh wow, that's 150%. You're going to crush it here. And then when you get on the phone and you ask, how often were you outbounding? And they say, oh, I didn't have to outbound at all. I worked at Salesforce, or I worked at, other recognizable company. You've just wasted your time. You've wasted their time. You've wasted all the time organizing that meeting. It's just not productive. You need to be ultra specific. And
Absolutely.
I can't believe how many people would reach out to me based on that job description, because all I really put was the OTE and the quota and the inbound outbound expectations. And I got so many DMs saying, thank you so much for posting the OTE and the quota. I can't believe how many people don't put the two.
Yeah. It's amazing, isn't it? Honestly, I think it's incredible that in this market today, people still don't advertise what those things are. It's just all, FUD around. Well, typically, why would someone not do that? It's because they have a mandate across their business. They don't advertise salaries because they don't pay everyone equally inside their business.
That too.
And they go, we can't go and really annoy everyone in our existing team by saying that this role is going to be paying 20, 30 grand more. And it's like, well, hold on. If these people have been successful, they should probably get paid about the same. So typically, I would say if you're not in a position where you can advertise quota in the marketplace, and what the base looks like and what the commission looks like, and even some flesh around what success looks like in year one, try and unblock a lot of those things, because you will attract all different kinds of people who have completely wrong expectations. And the worst thing in the world is to go through a 2 or 3 stage interview process before you get into a salary negotiation to find out that the budget's half of what you need to live, and what your aspirations are. So yeah, brilliant point. Number 2, what's the second biggest mistake that you see people making in their hiring?
I see this a lot in my consulting clients who maybe have never gone to market before, or they're very early stage. They don't have the GTM experience. So totally understand it. But the second biggest mistake I see is asking close-ended questions on the skills. So we've defined what we're looking for and the skills. And so again, if we go back to the $1 million quota, but 50% of it has to be outbounding, it's not enough to say, do you have outbounding experience? Because they might be thinking like, yeah, I booked a demo once, or like I closed a deal once. And that's not the same. You want to ask something that's far more telling, like, tell me about the last logo you closed from prospecting, including the methods you used to find and close it. You want to ask really broad questions. Are they similar methods to what you're going to be using? Or did they have a list handed to them that's just not going to be relevant to you at your company, right? A list of leads. So you want to ask open-ended questions so that you can look and find similarities and determine if you're going to be setting this person up for success or failure.
Interesting. I would imagine the reason why someone wouldn't ask open questions is either because they just never went through that fundamental communication training to understand that you shouldn't ask a closed question unless you know the answer, or they just have a form and they need to demonstrate that they've asked the question, particularly if you're talking about this being a relatively early stage recruiter who's never done the role of managing a sales team, hasn't actually ever carried a quota, and their job is to provide a qualified shortlist to a hiring manager to go and interview. So if you don't have the easy, this number fits in a box, or there's a yes, no to this specific requirement, how do you determine what good looks like?
Well, I think to your point, it's even deeper than just having a box. I think people want to make these hires so bad that they want certain answers, right? So they ask, do you have prospecting experience? Because they want to hear a yes. Like subconsciously or consciously, they want to have those boxes checked. And so as a hiring manager, whether it's your first time, second, third, fourth, 10th, whatever, it's important to remain with open-ended questions, because finding that they don't fit your box is just as important as finding that they do. So you don't want to lead them to any answer, because if they say, I've never really prospected, great. This call's over. Let me put 20 minutes back in your day, 20 minutes that I can go spend sourcing candidates again.
Sure. Interesting. What other most common closed questions do you see people asking in recruitment that they could make into an open one and make it much better?
Yes, they'll ask. So for example, again, do you have prospecting experience? And so that's closed-ended. To make it open-ended, it would be, tell me about the last time you closed a deal by prospecting and what methods did you use to find it? So that would be a great example. Or if you're trying to figure out which segment they've sold into before, have you sold into mid-market? Would be the close-ended. And an example of open-ended would be, tell me about the sales cycle at your previous role and walk me through the process start to finish.
Yeah, interesting. I honestly think people don't even ask like bandings, So I think it's fundamental for us when we go to market to be able to tell someone what the average sales cycle is and the average deal value. Like basic stuff. But when you give people that clarity, they're like, oh my God, thank you so much for telling us that, because we're looking to sell, complicated deals. So for example, had a guy about a month ago, the average deal size was a 30k deal. He was looking to sell 150 plus because he was really looking to forge a career in enterprise. And without that clarification, we would have gone through the whole process. And he said he'd gone through about 5 processes where right at the end of the process, he found out that this was a mid-market sale or an SMB sale, which was a total waste of time. So he was turning down job offers for companies who had gone through the full process only to find out that they weren't going to be getting this guy, which is a real shame. It's a total waste of time. What's number 3, Meredith?
Number 3 for mistakes made in sales hiring is not digging deep enough into numbers. So I get this again all the time with my consulting clients. And this happened just last week. One founder said to me, I'm interviewing all these people and they keep saying they're the top sales rep. Can they all really be the top sales rep? How do I know if that's true or not?
Sure.
Which is a typical salesperson, right? They're always going to be number one, but they're not, in truth, always going to be number one, right?
Sure.
So a few ways to dig into the numbers is asking things like, okay, you were the number one rep. How many people were on your team? How many people were in your segment? Number one for how long? Is this the year? Is this the quarter? Tell me a little bit more about that. How do you stack rank on your team? And so being number 1 out of 2 is a lot different than being number 3 out of 35, right? So I really like the stack ranking question. And, if it's not an org wide, it can be segment wide, or you can ask things like, okay, you're number 3. How far were you behind number 1?
Sure.
Why do you think that was? Or you're number 1. What do you do so differently than your peers?
Sure.
You really want to dig into, I'm the best that ever was.
Yeah, absolutely. I've got an amazing statistic for you, Meredith. You'll love
Hit
this.
me. Yes.
I have 100% success rate of only seeing CVs of over target sales reps.
Why?
I've never seen a resume or a CV that said that someone was under target. So it just turns, I don't know what it is about me. I must be special. I only attract reps who have been over 100% of their quota. It's incredible, isn't it?
You should do everyone's recruiting then.
I know, right? It's absolutely, it's amazing.
Yeah, there you go. That is wild. Not surprising.
It's amazing, absolutely incredible. It is very funny because there's still, even though we know the data, I mean, I'm not sure what the data is in your niche, but the latest data I saw from RepView was that only 41% of reps were over target in 2022. I saw that
too, yeah. So, okay, so 1 out of 2 people that write to you then, or 1 out of 2, almost in a quarter, are liars.
No, they just don't apply to my jobs, you see, They apply for everyone else's jobs.
Blame the bot. The bot just wrote it, right?
Yeah, exactly. But it's an interesting one because you kind of have to make it safe for people, right? It's not bad to miss your quota. Obviously, it's not good, but there's a whole bunch of things outside of your control. Did the quotas, again, I'm in Pavilion, and there's a Pavilion Pulse that goes out each month, and it talks about quota attainment in teams, and it talks about, did your quota reduce? Did it stay the same? Did it increase? And a lot of businesses who say that they didn't achieve the numbers then put up the quota to catch up for the year, which from a sales rep's point of view, if there are loads of uncontrollables around, maybe there's a specific thing that changed in the market, maybe there's a specific problem with the product, maybe the data, maybe the segmentation, all those things that can go wrong, which there's a list as long as my arm and then a few, will affect a rep's ability to be successful, let alone the environment, let alone the leadership, let alone the training and the enablement, the expectations that were set in that recruitment process. There's so many things that can go wrong. So it's really important for me to get across a message, which is, if you're a hiring manager, don't be afraid of or put off by an under target rep just because that rep was under target. There's a whole bunch of context and information to understand there that might make that rep, who was a 70% rep, 10 times more effective than the 120 rep from Salesforce. I know you mentioned Salesforce as the sort of example, but it's such an incredibly powerful business that absolutely own their space. If you're going to contact a business about having a CRM system, it's the gold standard. So that's what gets you through the door, right? Whereas there could be a business which has absolutely zero brand. They put no money into marketing at all. It's a really complicated deal. They have to do a challenger sale, and that rep's consistently hit 75 to 80% of quota. We're the top performing rep in the team, but never hit their OTE. What's your view on under target reps and how hiring managers can look at those people and catch the diamonds?
Yeah, and it's a great call out, and a good hiring manager will keep in other factors like you mentioned into account, right? So for example, last year too, layoff after layoff after layoff. There's a lot going on in the market. Like you said, 75% at a very difficult to sell product is sometimes more impressive than 100% at a layup. So it's important to ask the contextual questions of, okay, 75%, but where did you stack rank in the team? Why were you at 75%? What was the gap between you and the next rep above you? And just kind of dig in a little bit more into the numbers. Because a lot of times they'll say, yeah, I was at 75%, but I was the top rep. And that's why I'm here looking for another job, is I'm sick of, busting it, and I'm just sick of like busting my tail and only hitting 75%, and I'm the top rep. Like I want to be 110% as the top rep. So just dig deeper.
Yeah, absolutely. And have a look at the information on LinkedIn. You can see like the amount of employees and the tenure of a company. And I don't know about you, but I was thinking about this the other day. I think in SaaS particularly, whenever I hear a company name, I probably haven't heard of that company 95% of the time before I go and look up the company. Let's say that I'm talking to a candidate and I have to look at the company they've just come from. 95% plus of the time, I haven't heard of that company. And this is not really, maybe me calling out some naivety, but I'm quite happy to do it, which is when I have one of my network that joins a new company and they say, hey, Richard, I've got this new role. Probably 90% of the time I've not heard of that company either. So when you go and look at those companies online, don't just take the revenue number. Look at, is the number of employees going up or going down? Because if the number of employees is going up, they've just got funding, the revenue is increasing, and that rep is saying that they're under target, then there might be a bit of a sniff test problem that you need to go and call out there. But you can quite easily see, I saw a guy literally this morning who had left a company after 9 months, looked really good, except for this last, like a 9-month stint. And I was like, right, I need to go and understand that in a bit more detail. I realized the number of employees in that company had halved in the last 12 months. And they hadn't had funding for 3 years. And I'm going, in this market, that kind of makes a lot of sense. That they last 9 months in this market could be a really good thing. So it's a really good point, not digging enough into numbers. And also, I would think the other side of that is taking numbers too literally. Because if someone puts up a positive number because it's not yet okay to put negative numbers, which is a shame, but it's the reality, is we have to just almost not even imagine those numbers exist. Ask some questions around them, but you're going to find out some truth by asking some questions, which is much more powerful than what someone's taken the time to write on their CV.
Well, I think that's actually a really good segue, Richard, into mistake number 4, which is a lot of hiring managers, different questions each time they talk to a candidate. And this might sound counterintuitive, but hiring, or at least your interview process, should be fairly boring for you as the hiring manager, because you want to look for patterns, and you can't find patterns if you're asking different questions each time. And so to your point earlier, you want to ask the same questions. Maybe you're looking at a candidate who has done a 2-year stint, a 3-year stint, a 4-year stint, 9 months. You ask them, why did you leave each company? If they have a compelling reason of, oh, I really wanted to get into the enterprise space and I didn't have the opportunity at this place, and so I took that gamble. That was great. But then I really wanted to sell to this particular buyer, and so I jumped to this opportunity. And then, the 9 months product market fit wasn't there. You're going to get a lot of context there, just as much as you would to somebody who leaves every 9 months, right? So why'd you leave 9 month stint number 1? Well, my boss did this and my boss did that. Okay, why'd you leave 9 month stint number 2? well, the product wasn't really this or that, or okay, well, what about number three? Well, we didn't have marketing. And so again, you're looking for patterns. Are
Sure.
they owning their career? Are they leaving for a proactive reason, or are they blaming somebody or something else each time? Now, that's just one example, but you also want to look for, what did you like about that role? What did you not like about that role each time? Because again, you're looking for parallels or dissimilarities.
Hmm. Love it. So it might be giving away a bit too much, but let's go for it. When you start an interview, what are your first questions that you're always going to ask? The pattern of questions that you know are going to set you up for a great interview with a candidate.
Ooh, the questions I ask, it really depends on the role, and it goes back to the role outcomes and the skills, right?
So let's say
So,
it's a founding AE role, the role that you've just hired for. What would be the major first couple of questions that you would definitely want to know?
okay, so the first questions, and I open every interview with this is, I've done my research, I'm looking at your LinkedIn, I see your resume, but I always love to hear it straight from the source. Walk me through your career history and how we got here today.
Mm,
Looking for a few reasons. Can they tell me a story? Do they
sure.
have reasons or a line of thinking behind their career trajectory? Or do they just, I had a friend who joined here and it looked fun. Like, I want someone who has a little bit of thought into their next move. So I
Sure.
open up with that. I also want to see how long they talk for, Richard. It's a good testament. How they speak with me is how they're going to speak with our clients. Is it concise? Is it clear? Or did we just spend 15 minutes of your career history? So I open with that, and then they'll talk about their most recent role, and then I'll say, okay, so what's going on that's making you look at new opportunities? And they'll mention whatever's happening, and then they'll say, I'm looking for X, I'm looking for Y, I'm looking for Z. Great. There's a lot of startups out there. There's a lot of places where you can be one of the first reps. Why my company? So again, I'm looking for specifics. Have
Mm,
they taken the time to research the company? Do they have a compelling reason? Have they thought about if they really want to work here or not, or are they just, shooting darts in the dark? So those are the first three things I ask. And that will usually take about 10 to 12 minutes of any
sure.
first call. And then if they pass those sniff tests, then I'll start to softly go into some of the skills, right? So whether it's process or outbounding or closing.
Sure. Love that. That would definitely be a standalone clip because it's absolute gold. It's so true. Um, Whenever I've done interviews for sales roles, which I've done a lot of, it's always starting with a story. So we used to ask a question a lot, and my old CEO said that I was very strange and a bit quirky for asking this question, but it was incredibly revealing, which was
Mm,
after you'd made them feel safe and comfortable.
yeah.
From birth to being in this room with me today, tell me your life story. And it was very powerful because the things they focused on often revealed the things that they valued and how
That's
quickly they,
good. I like that,
yeah,
from life to birth. From
from
life at
birth,
birth to
yeah,
being in this room. Tell me your life story.
tell me your life story.
Whoa.
Exactly. And it was really interesting to see what people focused on, what they skipped. There was a lot of emotion in people's stories. The things that you could find out were incredible. And the best ones always had some kind of challenge that they overcome. They
Sure.
had, and it was really interesting. It was engaging. It was fun. There was humor. They brought, it was like watching something great on TV. Like it brought
Yeah.
emotion out of you and created connection always. And the ones that were bad either rushed through so quickly that you got no meat and there was just no depth behind it, or it was just so boring and waffly that you were just drifting off and thinking about something completely different, having to bring yourself back into the room. So that worked
I
very
love
well.
that one. Okay, I'm stealing that.
Give it a go. It works really well. It works really well. So so we've talked about keeping the questions consistent, having a pattern so you can recognize what good looks like. I know we talked about, the reason why it's good to be consistent is because you do want to get patterns. You don't want to ask such specific closed questions that you just get very hollow, uninspiring, and uninteresting, and lack of really a value back from when you ask a really rubbish closed question. But what about how you actually go and evaluate someone and whether they're good? Because you could ask someone loads of questions about their history and they could answer very, very well. talk to us about evaluation. What's the mistake that people make?
Yes, that is mistake number 5, is that most hiring managers lack an evaluation method. So when you're asking these questions, you need to have already established, what does good look like and what does not good look like, right? So if you're asking somebody, tell me about the last time you prospected, good might look like a story where they can walk you through start to finish of a logo and the methods they use to prospecting, and maybe it even includes one of the tools that you have in your in your tool stack.
Sure.
Not so good might look like they can't articulate, they don't prospect, maybe, they have a story but it's from 6 months ago because it's a lot of inbound. You need to have your North Stars ahead of time. And then from there, you need to figure out how you're going to score these answers. So not only good and not good, but is there an objective scoring system? Is it numbers based? Especially if you have multiple people evaluating, because they're going to have conversations where you're not in the room. You need to make sure you have the same idea of what good looks like, what good does not look like, and then a cohesive scoring process. So not only that, but you also need a firm process as well. So have you established these steps in your process? If you get off the phone with somebody, and most sales candidates are going to try to close you, or they should at the end of each call, they're going to ask, what are the next steps? So you need to be in line or aligned with your other sales leaders of, the next step is XYZ. And so you need a process and an evaluation criteria for each step of the process.
Interesting. So my experience of this is that most businesses don't assess people. I think more than half of sales roles aren't assessed. If they are assessed, then it's a very simple role play / presentation. And it's incredibly rare. I would say less than 5% of the time that someone has a scorecard. Really that rare. So what that means is a candidate, because you've gone through a few of these repetitions, you probably might be in a hiring process where you're looking to go and get a new job. You're learning all the time from different jobs what good looks like, and you're shaping what you're going to do based on the feedback you've heard from other people or how you felt something went. So you're trying to tailor something based on all these different people's completely unique businesses, criteria, value propositions, scorecards, all those things, which ends up with being this sort of very inaccurate use of their time, and it wastes your time. So in my experience, there aren't assessments that are defined against a criteria, and there certainly aren't those ones that have a clearly defined scorecard that we're going to look to expose during our assessments.
Yep.
What have you found works? So when you've got this right and you are assessing and evaluating properly, what did you do?
Yes. So it's done correctly if at the end of each stage, you can look at the score and make a decision right then and there. This person moves on, this person does not. It's objective. It takes a lot of well, they did this well, but they didn't do this well. And a lot of times you'll argue yourself, or have conflict with other panelists. So when there's a score, it's point blank. It's, yeah, they scored really well in this one part, but objectively, when I'm looking at the whole picture, they missed the mark on these 3 other things, and it's not enough to outweigh that. So what a good evaluation process leaves you with is no second guessing. Sure. I'm seeing more and more, not assessments, but maybe skill incorporations throughout the process, because like you said, anyone can interview well, and especially salespeople. They're very good at selling themselves. If they can't sell their products, they can at least sell themselves. Right?
Sure.
And so what we just did actually at P Club, and I found this helpful, was the first step, because outbounding is going to be such a big part of the job, is in the job description, I asked people to send me a prospecting email as they would a prospect, right? So they had to somehow find my email. They had to follow directions. You'd be surprised. So many people commented, I want to chat. When's the best time? Did not follow the assignment. Yeah. And then I can see a sample of their writing, right? Are they saying, problem, solution, call to action? Or is it, hi, I'm an account executive, I have all this experience, I'm great, I'm this, I'm that? If you're going to do that with the clients, like, that's not going to work well. It's a great tell. And so, to your point of what kind of skill assessments are working, that worked really well. And then we do a behavioral interview where I'm looking for those pattern style question and answers. And then I'm seeing this more than not these days. This is kind of a newer trend that, maybe 2 years ago started, but mock discovery or mock demo calls. And then some sort of cross collaboration interview, right? So if you're going to be working closely with a sales engineer, solutions engineer, you're going to be working closely with a BDR. A lot of companies want to see how you interact with them. If you can think about their org instead of just you as a sales rep. And so there's a lot of different things you can do throughout the process instead of, can you sell? Tell me how good you can sell.
Sure.
Were you at 100%? Great, you're hired. So there's a lot of behavioral things you can incorporate. I don't recommend doing it at every step because it gets old for the interviewee. It's just a lot to expect them to prepare something thoughtful 4 or 5 steps at a time, because they're researching your product and researching your sales process. And you want to make the experience show something thoughtful, but you don't want to exhaust your candidate because that's not going to be attractive to them.
No, particularly because you might only be hiring one and you might have a list of, 10 that you're starting with minimum. So it's really expensive for people, not just you, but for them. I think anyone that respects that is going to do really well, because every person you say no to, if they walk away going, look, it's a real shame I didn't get that, but this person's great. Meredith's amazing. P Club's amazing. Anyone would be lucky to work in this business. If you've got that going out into the market, that's much better than, I went into this process, spent 10 hours preparing for this task, did that, didn't get feedback for 2 weeks. Then I moved on to another interview, which was just a chat. And then I failed and I was told I just didn't have the experience. Don't work for this company. And you don't see that stuff. This is the iceberg problem, is that you don't see that, but then suddenly you can't attract the A players. You're having to overpay for the B players. Suddenly you're missing quota. You can't get pay rises and you start to tank. But this is probably the biggest unseen iceberg that businesses have, is how they treat people who don't get the job.
That too.
Whereas if you have a proper evaluation process like you talked about with scorecards, not only does that give you, as the hiring manager, the ability to make a decision on the spot, because it's already been predetermined what good looks like and what's a pass, you can immediately tell people why they failed. And whilst no one likes to fail, everyone respects being told very clearly, against these 5 things, these 2 things were under where we were looking for this reason. When you do this again, here's what we would like to see done differently. And it gives them a chance to get better and to learn.
I was very pleasantly surprised by how many people who I did not continue the evaluation with would ask me, do you have any feedback? Which I thought was great, right? And I firmly believe if anyone takes the time to ask for feedback, I'm going to give that to them. So it was, to your point, Richard, really helpful for me to be able to share with them, you did good in this and this, but we're looking for a little bit more in this area.
Absolutely. So we talked a bit about how your recruitment process should effectively be something that sells your business and that people enjoy going through, because it is hard and it is tough and no one likes doing it, really. What's the mistake that you see people making in terms of that they just don't spend enough time selling?
Yes, I see a lot of my consulting clients, and I fell victim to this myself too at P Club recently, is that we don't spend enough time selling. So we think of the interview as, I'm looking for these criterias. I'm trying to suss this out. I'm trying to better understand how they think about X, Y, Z. But and I know, and we should keep this top of mind, is that the best candidates usually aren't always looking for jobs, right? They're doing well, they're comfortable, they have tenure. And so to attract a top candidate, you have to sell them too, right? And so you have to convince them why they should leave the comfort of their current role or select your company over the other companies that they're evaluating. And so I think a big mistake is we don't sell why they should work with us enough. And so what I've incorporated, at least with P Club, and what I consult my clients to do is to largely emphasize on the first call. And you should be selling throughout, but the last 5 to 10 minutes should be discussing the role and all the excitement and why they should join, whether it's specific investors or a level of autonomy that they're looking for, or the potential of the market or the TAM or the OTE or the this, the that, and the third. We need to be selling them harder on the first call and throughout.
Absolutely. You're so right. I love this topic. The amount of effort that businesses put into building decks and training people to win investment versus the amount of time they put building collateral and training teams to be able to win the hearts and minds of talent is night and day. But if you look at it, let's say you're a business that's looking to raise 5 million and you're looking to do that across 3 investors. If you get one good employee who's going to stay with you for 2 years and hit quota at 1.2 million, that's worth more than one of those investors. But we treat them like they would be lucky to work in our business. And I see this less now. I think it's more of a big business problem where you have this big business and you're like, look, we are Oracle. You would be delighted to work with us. It would be an honor for you to work with us. Here's a 10-stage interview process. We're going to make it really tough. You're fighting straight away to get into our business. Interview question number 1. Why do you want to work for Oracle? What do you know about Oracle? Why should you get the job? Doesn't work in startups because they probably haven't heard of you. They might be able to do a bit of research on your company, but the marketing might be 6 months out of date, which in startup world means it's not even the messaging you use anymore with the marketplace. You probably don't have your best stories and best customers on your website that they can even refer to. It's really hard for people to do a great job. Not impossible, particularly if you've got a hiring manager like you and they can do all this research around the things that you're involved in, the podcasts you're on, the clubs you're in. You're making yourself very easy to research. A lot of businesses aren't like that. And probably the first person they speak to is going to be a junior recruiter or someone in HR, or maybe an agency with a really untrained person who's just trying to get a bunch of CVs in front of a client or resumes. So what I see consistently done wrong in this space is that businesses need to, like you've said, sell people. And I don't mean trick them. I don't mean oversell. And I don't mean like, here's why it's such an exciting time to join our rocket ship. Because no one's listening to that. But it's like, here's why I joined. Yes. The last 3 people that I hired, they were the problems that they were telling me that they were facing, the challenges they were facing, the things that they were looking to achieve. And here's how they've achieved those things in my business. Here are some examples of customers we've helped and why they said they chose us. Giving them all this reasons and learns and logical reasons as to why joining your business might be a great thing. But most importantly, it's not here's where we are, here's what we need you to do. It's here's where we're going. So I use this example quite a lot with people, which is recruiting people is almost like bringing people into your ship. So it's like hiring crew for a ship. Okay. And what most businesses do is they say, here's our boat. It's got 8 restaurants, 5 gyms, 10 sun decks, unlimited food and wine. I mean, to be fair, that sounds quite good.
Where do I sign?
Here's your cabin. Here's the thread count on the sheet. It's detail about the boat, about the cabin. And then it's like, and your role in this boat is to do this. I don't care about any of those things for very long if you're telling me the ship's going to be parked in Southampton Harbour for the next 2 years. If you tell me we're going on a world cruise, and I want you to join here, but your chances to develop inside this business and actually be a captain of this boat, you're going to learn these sorts of skills. It's going to be really tough. We're going to face a load of problems. By the way, it's not finished. We're still building part of this boat. Here's what we do have in place. Here's why this boat's got a really good chance of being successful. But here's why if you don't join us and be really great with us, it might all not work. I want that challenge because I'm going, where would I be in 2 years' time? So it's not about selling the boat, selling the role, selling the ship. It's about selling the destination. Because if people don't see that you're going somewhere, why would they follow you? Recruitment's leadership. It's saying, we're going here. Here's why you should join us. And if they're going to spend 2 years, 3 years, 5 years of their life helping you on your journey, that's a big decision for them. Why do you think that most businesses fail to put the right amount of effort and time into selling the opportunity?
I think that's a great analogy. I love your ship analogy, Captain Richard. All aboard. Count me in as your first mate. But I think you nailed it earlier in that we've just kind of gotten away from that as hiring managers. We have taken the Oracle approach, and especially kind of that, I don't want to call it fear, but the pressure as a hiring manager to get this hire right. The top of the call, we talked about how it's hundreds of thousands of dollars, right? So I think we just get consumed with this pressure of, I need to make the right hire. And so how do I make the right hire? I really suss them out. I ask them all these questions instead of getting them overly excited about joining the cruise.
Sure. Love it. I love it. I do honestly believe that any business that gets really good at selling in a recruitment process will win the hearts and minds of the best people who will stay with you for a number of years, even if it's tough. Because if you can tell people about the problems, the challenges, the things that don't exist up front, so you're creating a clarity around expectation, suddenly you avoid half of those reasons why someone leaves in the first 6 months anyway. Because whilst people fail their probation, I think with 50% of those people that fail their probation, if you ask them in an exit interview, would tell you that the expectations weren't set properly up front. So we owe it to people to not just sell positively, but to sell very clearly the problems that we're looking for them to go and solve. And if they want to be in that challenge, they want to be involved in that, then suddenly when they're facing those challenges in reality, because you've told them about them, they're not a surprise. And expectations management is 80% of sales success.
I've definitely been on the receiving side of that, Richard. Samsara was so good at selling the vision. They sell GPS technology for truck drivers, right? For trucking companies.
Yeah.
I was 26 years old at the time. My colleagues were anywhere from 28 to 30. We're all living in San Francisco. Do you think we want to be selling truck GPS trackers? No, but they were so good at selling the vision of, this is going to be a huge IoT play, and the founders have done this before, and it's definitely going to go public, and we're going to do this, and we're going to do that, and there's going to be so many career opportunities. Luckily, all that has played out, but they were so good at getting you bought into the vision, which you talked about of where we're going, that you're like, yeah, I'll sell to truckers. Sure.
Yeah. Absolutely right. And you can just hear the way you say that brand name, Samsara. You're saying it with like joy and excitement, and that's what you want, right? And it's because of that exact stuff. When I joined the business back in 2007, it was we are a UK business. We're just about to open up in Barcelona next year. We have plans to open up in APAC, probably in New Zealand, and we're going to open up in Miami. And I'm like, I knew from that moment, I want to be involved in opening up the Miami office. That's why I want to do it. I want to open up America. I want to be there. And so I set this goal to go and do it. It took me 10 years, but I was in Miami with this business that started as this UK business that talks about this stuff. But it was lead generation. My first ever lead gen SDR role was talking about Xerox printers with people. Did I care about Xerox printers? I learned a lot about them and got a little bit overly passionate about them, but definitely not. Definitely not. I have zero love for printers, and thank goodness I didn't make a career out of it, because that's ultimately commoditized. But
if anyone's printers breaks down, you know who to call.
Honestly, I literally have a broken printer beneath me right now, and I hate it. But it works. Vision works. Absolutely love that. Let's get really clear on where we're going and why that's exciting for people. And please, 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 people, don't say, we're really excited about this role. Who cares that you're excited? Tell us why you're excited. That's what's more powerful. What's number 7? What's the biggest problem that people are making in terms of the amount of time they're taking to do this whole thing?
Yes. I mean, we have talked at lengths now on how to properly assess a candidate and how to sell them on your vision and how to ask them open-ended questions and how to put them through a process. You have put so much time and energy into each candidate now. The next mistake I see is just making the process too long or wanting to evaluate too many candidates before extending an offer. I see analysis paralysis all the time. I hear from consulting clients, oh, I really liked Richard. He checks this box, X box, Y box, but I just want to see what else is out there. Why? Why would you do that? Like, so that's when I have to sit down with them and say, okay, again, you're missing 100K per month while this remains open. You like Richard, he checks the boxes. So I always advise that if you are 90% happy with the candidate, because just like anything in life, like nobody's going to blow you away 100% of the time. You need to just extend an offer. And then the second part of that is don't give them indefinite time to accept your offer, because they might be looking at other companies. They might talk themselves out of this. They might, consult with a friend, a family member, a spouse who starts getting worried, maybe if it's a startup, etc. So you want to use the words or wording along the lines of, we're really excited to bring you on board. I'd like to extend an offer. But if I were to, what else needs to happen on your end? What else do you need to do to decide? Well, I need to talk to my wife. I need to talk to my husband. I need to wait for other offers. Okay, well, if it's between us and another offer, like where are you leaning? Where's your head out? You want to keep sussing it out. Well, I'm not sure yet. Well, that's when you as a hiring manager have to come back and say, okay, totally get it. We do have a few other interested candidates, and normally we only extend written offers if they can be signed within 48 hours. So are we there yet? And if not, what's standing in the way? Something's still standing in the way. You still have selling to do, and then you can extend your offer. But if you find someone 90% of the way there, extend your offer, get them in the door, get it done.
I love that. It's almost like you're thinking like a salesperson about recruitment. Who would know, eh? Who would know that would be the right thing to do? Why would you spend time writing proposals that you don't have a blooming good chance of winning? It's like, writing a proposal for everyone that's 20% in your sales funnel. It's just a bad idea. No one's responding to us on our proposals. They weren't ready for one. So that's a really, really good point. And it's almost like this thing in recruitment where that if you send your first candidate and it's the best candidate, then it's very likely that someone's going to say exactly what you said verbatim, which is, seems perfect, but would like to see some more. And so I know people working in recruitment who will deliberately not send their best candidate first. Obviously, what I do, what I've learned to do through making this mistake myself, is to say up front with clients, look, I'm going to try and get this right first time. And if I send you someone who seems like they could be perfect, then my suggestion is we move fast here, because the market's really competitive. And if you have a good recruiter in place, and I'm not just saying there's 25,000 people like me just in the US who do tech sales recruitment. There's a lot of us to choose from. But a good recruiter will be able to give you the very honest feedback that a candidate might not give you directly. And so make sure you're asking whoever it is who has that relationship with someone for a bit of a tag team approach to getting that client over the line, because a good recruiter should coach that candidate, which also means giving you back very honest feedback. But I love that. We should move fast with people. In my experience, the whole process from you going to market to having an offer closed shouldn't be longer than a month. It should be maximum. If you're talking about really senior roles, of course, that takes a bit more time. You might have notice periods and all that sort of stuff. People might take more convincing. But if you've been looking for a role for 3 months and you still aren't down to that point where you're ready to go and get an offer out to someone, something's broken, and you could probably go back and watch this video again and take some notes. Amazing. So I'll tell you what then, Meredith. I know there's loads more we could talk about. There's the whole topic around onboarding. Maybe it's a separate pod. Let's say that I'm watching this and I'm going, look, we're trying to hire. I need some help. How could I go and get access to someone like Meredith? What's the best way for someone to get hold of you and gain the benefit of your expertise?
Yes, you can find me on LinkedIn. You can connect with me there, Meredith Chandler, or you can find me on merediththesalescoach.com. I'd love to help you with your hiring needs.
Beautiful. Well, Meredith, thank you so much for your time. It's been an absolute pleasure as always.
Thank you, Richard.
And we will drop in Meredith's contact details below. We'll also produce some content off the back of this, so watch out for an article with the 7 biggest mistakes that you can avoid to get hiring right first time. And we'll see you on the next episode. Thank you, everyone. See you soon.
Bye, everyone.